we'll just talk about few basic definitions that you all might know. A cell, a cell, we have a small cells of Panasonic and Duracell and all, which actually uses the chemical energy in order to change into electrical energy, right? So we all know the law that we always the energy is transferred from one form to another, and so we all know that there is no perpetual machine, like there is no perfect machine which converts 100% of energy. So always there will be a loss of energy from chemical to electrical in the form of heat. So then we as engineers need to develop and simulate those heat and try to remove it. So now imagine we are connecting 3 cells, 4 cells, 10 cells, 1000 cells together, then that form is known as a battery. It is a battery, and often we interchange these two terminologies inside, like we say we need a battery, but then actually we need a cell, and then when you connect 3-4 batteries, 3-4 cells, then it's a battery. Now within a cell there are actually 4 or 3 types. If we go into detail, 4. If we stay on the introductory part, it's 3. It's anode, cathode, and electrolyte. Now I assume that you all know the old form of electrolysis, where there is an anode, there is a cathode, and there is electrolyte. But it's not exactly electrolysis. It works on the same principle of electrolysis, where anode is a positive electrode which will give up the electron, right? So in 12th standard, I think you might have done your oxidation reduction reactions, where we'll do positive, the ions will go from positive to negative, generating that chemical energy, and with that chemical energy will generate electrical energy. Now the guy who accepts that ion is known as a cathode, right? So then the oxidation reduction reaction happens here, and the medium through which all this happens is called an electrolyte. Usually there are salts, or there are some ionic materials that we use as electrolyte, solid or liquid, depends. Usually it's liquid, but then we can use solid electrolyte also. So why do we need lithium ion batteries all of a sudden? Why we were not talking 10 years back? Why we were not talking about them 3 years back, 4 years back? Now what happened, everybody is trying to use fossil fuels so much. I don't know if you know that there are people actually using Arctic oceans in the North Pole in order to find the fossil fuels. There are so much demand of the fossil fuels these days, because of which there are too much CO2 emissions, which you all know, like it's global warming, it's snowing in Delhi and whatnot. So then because of these CO2 emissions, there is global warming, and there is a temperature drift from what we are supposed to know and what we don't know. So that we need green energy. Now what are the forms of green energy that we can do? We can use batteries, we can use what else we can do, hydrogen fuel cells, we can use natural gas and all, natural for green energy. But then why do we use only battery propelled vehicles? Now the problem with hydrogen fuel cells comes is the combustion part of the hydrogen. Hydrogen is so much explosive that it can burst your car like an atom bomb. Natural gas, it has also again its own emission. So then for the moment we have the best option available to us is the battery propelled vehicles, right? So we can use lithium ion batteries to propel our vehicles, convert it into electrical energy, use that electrical energy to drive a motor which is already present in the car, and then we can propel. Now we don't have 100% of battery propelled vehicles. We can use hybrid vehicles. Use what? They'll use battery to a certain part, and then they'll use a conventional IC engine, so that you have a mixed energy available to you for the propulsion of your vehicle, right? So you use IC engine when you need extreme loads. When you are not needing extreme loads, like you are in traffic, you'll use the remaining battery part. So then you have hybrid. So we work towards the hybrid. Now what we need is we work towards full electric cars. So we have two concepts of EVs, which are called electric vehicles, and we have HEVs, which are called hybrid electric vehicles. Now on the right, you'll see two charts. One is, both of them are bar charts. One is comparing the demand of lithium ions from 2015 to 2030. So in 2015, only 19 gigawatt hours of electrical energy was needed. Electrical energy for propelling the cars were needed, which rose to 123, which rose to 400. And 2030, people have estimated that 1,293 gigawatt hours of of electrical energy would be needed as in the form of lithium ion batteries. Now, to what I think everybody knows that they all know Tesla, who was the first company to start with the electric vehicle part. But actually, Chevrolet has worked on electrical part. GM has worked on electrical part. And then the Tesla was the one which came with the ergonomic design of using cylindrical batteries for propulsion of the electrical car. Cylindrical batteries as in the one we use in a remote controls. Imagine using your remote control batteries in thousands of them and then driving a car itself. It has its own problems, but then the Tesla was the one which actually came up with a very aerodynamical part, which was very good looking, and it was one of the best cars that you can take it. Now, I think everybody took last year part, where if the demand is increasing, then the cost has to go down. So when the cost went down, from 2010 to 2016, it was around from 20% to it rose to 35% in 2014 to 15. That is because there are many people who are buying the car. There is a lot of research going on in the lithium ion batteries, and they all know that there is a future prospect for lithium ion batteries. So earlier there used to be only one producer manufacturer of the lithium ion batteries. Now they have Panasonic, they have too many companies, Maxwell, which work on developing lithium ion batteries for cars. Now you have to pay little attention that you cannot use the remote control batteries for driving a car, but you need a different lithium ion batteries in the same shape, in the same size, but you need to change the materials to drive a car, because you cannot drive a car with the small lithium ion batteries that you have in your remote controls. So we'll talk about how lithium ion batteries actually work. What is the principle behind them? So they simply work on a principle of converting chemical energy into electrical energy via redox reactions, right? Oxidation reduction reaction. So what we have one positive electrode, we have one negative electrode, which is shown in the figure on the left. And then you have some lithium ions going from left to right or right to left, depending upon whether you are charging or discharging the battery, right? And how will they go through? They have an electrolyte, as we talked earlier, through which they'll go from one way to another way. Now here you might ask that there is a separator inside the electrolyte. What this separator does, this separator makes that only lithium ions will pass through it and nothing else goes through it towards the negative side, so that there are different layers. As you all know that the graphite is arranged in such a way, graphite is actually one cathode that we use. So say graphite or copper. So these carbon layers are arranged in layers, and then these lithium ions will go and get stuck between the two layers of this graphite or carbon. And then when you are discharging, again the same reverse happens when they'll come back. So discharging is when the lithium ions come back from this graphites towards the positive side, and when charging is when you do the inverse, right? So you need to charge and then you will discharge. But of course, you'll not be charging at the same rate as you'll discharging. You want your car to be charged in 2 hours, you'll be discharging in, depends on you. So then the same thing goes here on the right. We have talked about different like materials that we use for anode and cathode. We have carbon, we have graphite, we have hard carbon, we have graphene. So now graphene is one of the newest materials that they have developed in order to get the maximum efficiency out of the lithium ion batteries. Now the positive electrode we say is, say lithium iron phosphate, we have lithium manganese oxide, and too many lithium manganese carbide also we can use, LMC, in order to use the anode or the positive. So then the electrolyte are usually salts, which actually conducts the lithium ions, but then it should not conduct the electricity.
Hello, sir.
Or else, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. You can just stop sharing and again share your screen. We hope that the annotate, that the wording gets disappeared. We hope.
Okay, one second.
Yeah, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
So, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
No problem. No problem. Yeah. So yeah, we can use some solvent. We can use some salts as electrolyte, where the it conducts lithium ions, and they do not conduct electricity, right? So you don't have internal short circuit inside your battery. Internal short circuit, as in, have you ever seen your bulb go bizarre or it just stops working? That is because of either high power or it just short circuits. So then there is a current inside the battery, and thus it does not allow the battery to work. So then it should not conduct electricity, but it should conduct lithium ions going from positive to negative or negative to positive, depending upon charging or discharging, right? So this is just the basic example of how lithium ion works. There is, now you might ask, why do we need a separator? Why don't we use anything else in the in the form of separator. Usually separators just allow lithium ions to go. What happens if there are some ions other than lithium ions that go, there is some oxidation reaction happening at the lithium part, then only lithium ions are allowed to go and the rest of the part stays with the positive side. So that is why we need a separator. Now separator is a very complex part to understand, but you might understand from osmosis. In osmosis you use one layer in order to protect some salts coming from high salt concentration part to the low salt concentration part, and the other side should not happen, the inverse should not happen, right? So you can compare it with the semi permeable membrane that we use in lithium in osmosis or reverse osmosis, right? So yeah, going forward just a little. Yeah, so now what are the types of cell geometries that we already have? So commercially speaking, there are three types of cell geometries that we have. One is cylindrical cells, which we all know, which you use in remote controls. I don't know if you guys have seen some prismatic cells. Prismatic cells are used where there is a little high concentration of energy is needed. In simple terms, we might call it as energy density. If the energy density of the cell we need is high, then the cylindrical cells, then we use prismatic cells, right? If we need more energy density than prismatic cells, then we use a bigger, larger size of the cells, which are called pouch cells. Now prismatic cells you might have seen in some toys which use a little bit of electric, which use cells as for the usage. Small cells like cylindrical cells, which you might have seen in your remote controls or too many applications like torch or everywhere. Now the point comes where pouch cells, where you can see pouch cells. Now pouch cells are developed just because they need to be used in cars, and the energy density should be lower, should be higher, but the space occupied should be lower, right? So they are very thin films. I don't know if you have seen iPhone batteries ever. Now they are a part of prismatic cells. Some iPhones use pouch cells. Pouch cells are used in order to use your iPhone for a longer period of time. But then the problem with cylindrical pouch cell comes is you cannot use them without generating a lot of heat. So we'll talk later on what is that. So there are just good points and advantages and disadvantages regarding the cell geometries. Like you all know, cylindrical cells are smaller. Prismatic cells are smaller than pouch cells, but then they are not as small as cylindrical cells. So that is one of the biggest reason why Tesla went with cylindrical cells and they didn't use pouch cells or prismatic cells for Tesla cars. Now they are very easy to manufacture, cylindrical cells. Where the problem comes with pouch cells and prismatic cells is you have to have a particular defined geometry. You have to arrange every component in such a way that the thickness should not increase. The easy point thing is all you have to do is spiral the components and make it a cylinder in cylindrical cells. So they are very easy to manufacture. But again, the disadvantage comes is when they are easy to manufacture, it's very difficult to manage the heat removal from there. So heat removal is the surface area, the amount of cells you can manage is very easy, but then very high number of cells you can use. But at the same time, you cannot use different channels of water. You cannot use different channels of say any coolant, say water, ethanol, glycol, in order to remove the heat from there from the cylindrical cells. But the surface area is square in pouch cells and in prismatic cells, so you can use a lot of air, you can use a lot of water in order to remove the heat generated, right? So then literature review will talk just a little bit of more technical stuff. I'll talk about it and then we can shift towards the commercial part of it. Literature reviews say 5 scientists works on why lithium ion batteries are need to be simulated via CFD. Say 10 scientists works on how we can remove heat from lithium ion batteries. So we'll just talk about the literature review. Now this is one of the best papers I've found in understanding the thermal behavior, the heat generation part of batteries. Now what this guy did is he used Bernoulli heat equations. You can search on internet what are these Bernoulli heat equations to generate the heat, to model the heat generated in a cell. Now if you know how much heat is generated in your cell, then you know how much it is supposed to be removed, right? So you should know what is your problem definition and then you can work for the solution. So this guy actually defined the problem for the batteries to be used in automobiles. What he did is he modeled heat generation. He modeled heat generation via code generated in Fortran. He validated that via experimental setup. And then he modeled temperature as a function of DOD. DOD is called depth of discharge. Say your battery works for only 5 minutes, but the amount of time it should work when it is fully charged is 10 minutes. So your depth of discharge is 50. You have already used up 50% of the battery. Now the remaining 50% is supposed to be used later on, or you are using it right now. So that is called DOD. If you subtract DOD from 1, you get something called SOC. SOC is state of charge. So whatever is remaining is called SOC. Whatever you have used up is called DOD. It's just a tricky part, but then it's just some technical part that he defined in his paper. Now, he didn't use any cooling method. He didn't use any forced convection method, no liquid cooling method to remove the heat that was supposed to be removed from the battery. What he did was he just modeled temperature as a function of the amount or the rate of use of this battery. What he found was there was only an error of 2 degrees Celsius, which is called one of the best experiments that he must have done between CFD and experimental results. Usually in industries, you have a difference of 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. But then here he had a 2 degrees Celsius difference, which is one of the best things he has done in the field of experimental analysis. What he showed that battery can be modeled using irreversible heat generation equation, which you go on the internet, you find Bernard heat equation, you will find out there are two parts, reversible and irreversible. So being engineers, I know what is, you should know what is reversible and irreversible. So when irreversible heat is when you generate the same amount of heat while charging or while discharging. But if you keep the same amount of heat only while discharging, then it is irreversible. And if you are generating the heat again and again while charging or discharging, then it is called reversible. So what he said that we'll neglect the reversible part. We do not see the amount of heat generated during charging because it is same as discharging. We'll just model the heat generated in a battery during discharging. That's all. So that it is irreversible. You are not supposed to be caring about the charging part of the battery. So this was one of the biggest drawbacks that I found out in this paper, because you need the both heat generation to get an exact temperature in your CFD model. So what happens when the battery temperature goes around a certain part? What will happen? Say your battery will not work properly, it will stop. So ever if you have found in your phones that you charge your battery to 100% and then it came down to 20% at like 10 seconds or 20 seconds, then we say there is a problem with the battery. But why that problem came is the reasons are listed here in this slide. So either there is a problem that the amount of battery you have used up, the way you have used up your battery is very bad, that you are plugging in your battery and then you're using your phones. So same goes with the cars. So you cannot use a car while you are charging it, right? So that's why you have a different circuit for charging, you have a different circuit for discharging. So say your temperature, the ideal temperature that the battery should work on is say 20 to 40 degrees Celsius. It is a little debatable. Somebody says 10 to 40, somebody says 20 to 40, but it's better to go 20 to 40 is what I've seen on my personal experience. Now, if the battery temperature goes around 100 degrees Celsius, so if the 100 degrees Celsius, the graphite sheet that we talked about, it will dissolve, it will change into liquid form, and then you don't have anything for the lithium ions to get stuck to, right? So then there won't be any chemical conversion to electrical conversion and your battery will stop working. Now, say your battery temperature goes above 100 degrees Celsius, then we'll say that there is a layer called SEI layer. I don't know if you can see in the picture. SEI layer says that it's solid electrolyte layer. So there is an electrolyte layer formed on the negative electrode, which actually protects the internal short circuit. But if it's breaking down, then there is a problem of internal short circuit. If there is an internal short circuit, then your battery won't work, there will be a blast. So you don't need that. So then your SEI layer starts to decompose at 190 degrees Celsius, but then around 110 degrees Celsius, it will stop, it will completely decompose, and then you have internal short circuit. Now, even after internal short circuit, it will be a possible venting. Venting is the gases. The electrolyte will change its phase from liquid to gas. And then because of that gas, the gas needs to go out. The original tendency of gaseous states particles is they need to expand. So then because of that 160 degrees Celsius temperature, the gases will expand and then you'll have a blast. And around 200 degrees Celsius, they'll just blast. In technical terms, we call it venting, or it will start thermal runaway. Thermal runaway is you charge your battery and within 1 second it's zero. So then there is no storage of the battery. There is no storage of the electrical energy in the battery actually. So then that is called, in very layman terms, we call it thermal runaway. So around 200 degrees Celsius, we can't even think there has to be a very blast in the battery. Now what we found out is the battery temperature should be kept around 20 to 40. So we need some active cooling in order to prevent the temperature to go above 40 degrees Celsius or below 20 degrees Celsius. So then this is the part where actually CFD comes in. They give different circuits, they give different ways of cooling, and then because of this, the battery temperature has to be maintained between the given range of 20 to 40, right? Okay. So now you'll be asking, okay, he talked about too many technical stuff, but then are there any electrical vehicles which are currently being used? So I've listed just the best 5 that I found. There are many, but then these are the best 5 that people have worked on as CFD engineers in order to get the temperature of the batteries as well as provide cooling. So now Nissan Leaf, I don't know if you know, Nissan Leaf was one of the best cars which pioneered the battery electric vehicle or battery propelled vehicles in the automobile industry. So they used an anode of LMO, lithium manganese oxide, and the cathode is always carbon. Now I'm saying carbon, but that carbon can come from graphite, that carbon can come from graphene, right? Now the other car that they have used is Chevrolet Volt. Chevrolet Volt is a sub power, like they used LG batteries in order to propel, and again the battery they have used is LMO, again lithium manganese oxide, and carbon. Now carbon, again graphite, graphene, whichever way you want you can take. One of the big names that comes is Tesla Roadster and Tesla Model S. Why, you might ask, that why they are not using LMO and LMO and they are using NCA? That's a different talk. That Tesla developed their own CFD team, they worked on it, and then they found that NCA is much better than LMO and it gives much higher power as compared to LMO. And so they use cylindrical cells for the first time in a car. The amount of cells they have used is humongous. You might say 4,000 cells are easily present in any Tesla car. And then that 4,000 cells are of NCA and again carbon, and carbon as in graphite, graphene. And they use these cells in order to propel these purely electric vehicles. Tesla, as we all know. I think Ritesh Deshmukh owns one. Yeah. So then what are the effects and what are the different cooling strategies that are present? So first of all, as we talked that Bernardi heat equations, we need to develop the model that generates heat. We should know how much heat is generated. From there, we should know how much heat is generated when you are using them on a transient model. Say you are pressing the accelerator like 100% and then you are giving the throttle to 50%. How much heat is generated for that period of time? You should model that. Then you should model how am I supposed to reduce the heat generation. One of the best ways is to add fins or baffles, right? But when you can add fins or baffles, it should bring the temperature below 40 degrees Celsius or above 20 degrees Celsius, whichever way. But then if it works, it's first, or usually it doesn't work. You have to use your own intellect, you have to use your own knowledge to find out which is the best way to do it, correct? So that's the tricky part here, where the 3D CFD transient model comes into play, and the optimization. That's why I added the word optimization. There are already some cooling strategies present, but then you have to actually optimize it, and then you have to find out the best strategy that is to be there in order to cool the batteries, right? And there is much more. There is you can use PCM, you can use PCM as in phase change materials. You can use something called passive cooling. You can use something called active cooling. You can actually use a radiator to cool the batteries, right? So in Tesla cars, go and search on YouTube whether there is a radiator or not, and then think, these guys actually need a radiator if you actually need to cool the batteries? Or if you don't need to cool the batteries, then why is there a radiator in the much of the electrical cars that are already present?